السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Today, inshallah, we're going to be doing the Tafseer of Surah Al-Qari'ah. So we're progressing, and I really hope that everyone is memorizing these short chapters as the Tafseer is going. The chapters are pretty short. They're not very long. They do get longer in a couple of weeks. So as I always do, please, I encourage you all to memorize these surahs, play them over and over again during the week, and re-listen to this tafsir if needed, if required, so that the meaning will sink in, inshallah. So I'll start with reciting the surah a little bit quick, normal pace, and then at the end I will recite it a lot slower so that inshallah you can see if you've retained some of the tafsir information, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية. So this chapter is Meccan, and it's obvious that it's Meccan because of the content that it's revolving pretty much around the Day of Judgment, which was also the theme discussed prior to the Hijrah, where the majority of the disbelievers, they were the people who denied Allah in Mecca. And they denied Allah's ability to resurrect his creation. Because remember, they admitted that they believed in Allah, but many of them denied actually Allah's ability to resurrect him. And they didn't believe that Allah was actually going to judge them on the Day of Judgment. This surah only contains 11 verses, and it's the 101st chapter of the Quran. And this surah pretty much calls for the human being to make repentance as soon as possible. This is what you are supposed to feel at the end. So the surah revolves around or in other words, the Day of Judgment. And it seems that this surah has been revealed pretty much as a warning. So to warn you and I, and to warn the disbelievers, that even though we're very, very busy in worldly affairs, don't forget that the Day of Judgment is coming. And the Day of Judgment for you is when you die. So a lot of people are always worried about, when is the Day of Judgment? It's coming, it's coming. Okay, it might come in 500 years, but pretty much the Day of Judgment for you is when you die. So keep this in mind every single day. Don't become so busy that the Day of Judgment, it just, the thought of it comes to your mind occasionally, or when somebody dies. It actually should be on your mind daily. So pretty much this surah is describing a few horrific scenes, okay, of the Day of Judgment. And I'll give you a quick summary of the Day of Judgment and what comes to follow it. But for you to really have a full effect about what's happening on the Day of Judgment, I would recommend, if possible, for the next minute or two, if you could sit down, close your eyes, and allow nothing else to occupy your mind for just a minute. Okay, I'll take you a minute before I begin this tafsir. Okay, so here we go. Imagine this. Eyes are closed, you're sitting down. It's the Day of Judgment. You've crawled out of your grave. Some people are asking you for some of your good deeds, but you need those good deeds. So what do? You run, you bolt it. You feel selfish because some of these people may be your children asking for these deeds. But the truth is that no one is willing to give away a single deed, not even to their own kids, not even to their own parents. People are running like crazy. It's like a movie. Everyone's confused. They look like scattered moths, not knowing where to go, left or right. Where do I go? Every direction looks dangerous. You see like mountains above being uprooted from the ground, and then they're just flying around like fluffed up wool. It's like a scene from a movie, but now it's not a movie, it's real. Eventually, after a while of this going on for a long, long time, you've lost count how many years it's been. Allah's court is established and people are having their day in court. And your turn is coming because you know that everyone gets their day in court. Okay, so you're really nervous, but you kind of just want this day to be over and done with. You just want the result and you just want it over and done with. Finally, you're called in. It's your day in court. The court is full. Your deeds are literally placed in front of you on a scale. And not only the ones that you're proud of, like the Quran that you read and your charity, but the most embarrassing sins are there in front of you, and that you were hoping that no one would hear. There's also a jury, and there's also witnesses. So people that actually saw you doing these deeds are there in court. Even your own body parts are going to speak out against you or for you. So you try to shut them up, okay? You try to put your hand over them. But when you do, they actually talk and they say, Allah has inspired us to talk, so we are going to talk. So anyway, you've got no power or authority to wind them up. So you just have to hear all this stuff being said about you, and it can go on for ages. Your deeds are literally weighed on a scale. Like, you know, those, just imagine an actual scale, a physical scale. And after that scale and the court, you'll know your result. You know that you're either going to go to hellfire or you're going to go to the Jannah. It's one of those. And you're hoping that your good deeds outweigh your evil deeds. If it happens to be that your deeds are equal, meaning like your good deeds are equal to your bad deeds, you'll be sent off to a place called Al-Araf, which is a really high station where you're going to need to stand there and wait for ages until Allah forgives you. But you don't know how long you're going to be standing there for. You don't know. Is it going to be years? Is it going to be months? You don't know. And while you're standing there, you're looking up and you turn to your right and you see the people of Jannah. And you know, you ask them for some water. And then you look to the people on your left and you see the people of hellfire being melted away. And you pray to Allah, please, please be merciful to me. Don't let me go there. And you eventually make it to your final residence, either to the hellfire or the gardens of Jannah. And that's the end of it all. That's the end. Okay? Eternity is there. Full stop. You can open your eyes now. That was I try to pretty much give you a little bit of a glimpse of the Day of Judgment. So pretty much your life and everything that you do in your life will be what will lead you to your final destination in the Akhirah, okay? And no one can blame anyone for their final exam results. You're going to have no one to blame but yourself. You cannot blame your children, your husband, your friend. You can't. Okay, and in a nutshell, that was the summary of this whole, pretty much this surah. I would highly recommend everyone to read a book. I put it actually up on the screen, what I've read. It's book number 6 of the Islamic Creed series. It's a really good series and it focuses on everything, you know, from belief in Allah, all the beliefs that we need to believe in. And in particular, if you look at that number 6, it's about the Day of Judgment, and the author is Umar al-Ashqar. So I put the picture there. I actually studied this book, number 6, with Sheikh Abdul Salam in my Sharia class, and it was an in-depth studies. And he gave me a really detailed explanation of the Day of Judgment, and he gave explicit scenes of the Day of Judgment according to the Quran and Sunnah. It's very sahih. And it included in it, which I found very interesting, the Sirat and everything around the Sirat, the Qantara, what happens from the time of your death until you pretty much put your first foot in inshallah in Jannah, Ya Rab, and we pray that we are the people of Jannah. So I would really recommend that you buy this whole series. Ideally, if you get this series, you'll understand everything. But if you want to just know more about the Day of Judgment, you could just get that book number 6. Okay, so now we're going to start, inshallah, with the tafsir. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Al-Qari'ah, the shocker, or the striking calamity. That's pretty much what it means. So the word Qari'ah means the striking one or the striking calamity. And, well and truly, the day of judgment, it's a big calamity. And on that day, people are going to be struck with fear. The word Qari'ah comes from the word Qara'a, which is when two things that hit each other really violently, and it makes really annoying, disturbing sounds, and it scares you. So that loud noise, it takes away peace. Like, for example, if a car crash happens, like, two cars are hitting each other, they collide with each other, it can be called a Qari'ah because they make a really big bang sound that's scary, and it shocks the person that's passing. So that's what it means. So Al-Qari'ah is a terrible calamity. It's a disaster. There's going to be lots of noise there. And this day will especially be shocking for the one who disbelieved in Allah and denied the day of judgment altogether. Because for us Muslims, we're scared of it. Sometimes it's a bit in the back of our mind, but we know it's coming. Like when it comes, we are going to be shocked, but not like the shock of the atheist or the person who does not believe in Allah or believes in another religion. Their shock is going to be different to our shock because we are scared of it coming. It's coming, okay? But for the disbeliever, especially for the one that completely denies Allah, they don't think it's even coming. So when it actually does come, it's really shocking for them. So Al-Qari'ah is one of the names given to the Day of Judgment, and each name describes the Day of Judgment. So there's lots and lots of names for the Day of Judgment, and the more names that something has, the greater that thing that is being described. And that's why we've got so many names and attributes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's so great. And similarly, the Day of Judgment has lots and lots of names. And on the screen, I put some names of the Day of Judgment. I'll mention just a couple of them. So the word Yawm means the day. So all of them, Yawm means the day, and then Al means the. Okay. So for example, Yawm al-Qari'ah, or you can say al-Qari'ah, the day of rising or standing. Yawm al-Qiyamah. The first one is Yawm al-Qiyamah because the word Qiyam means to stand. That's why when we are in our when we wake up at night, we're praying Qiyam al-Layl, Qiyam, because it means standing. So it's the day of rising or standing. Yawm al-Hasra, the day of regret. Yawm al-Fasl, the day of separation. You're separating the good from the bad. Yawm al-Din, the day of recompense. And al-Haqqa, the inevitable reality. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are some of the names of the Day of Judgment. And you'll notice, subhanAllah, how each name, it explains something that's going to happen on that day, or the outcome of the day, or how you feel on that day. Like, subhanAllah, Yawm al-Hasra, the day of regret. It's called Yawm al-Hasra because on that day, you're going to feel so much regret. Like, you will regret those movies you watch. You will regret those clothes you wore. You will regret the food you ate, and you will regret the arguments that you had. You look so much regret to the point you just really want to go back and change things, but it is too late. So there are over 20 names given to this great day. And subhanAllah, each one of these names, it describes an incredible attribute and a description of that great day. And it's really worth pondering over these names. Really think about these names and the consequences of the Day of Judgment based on these names. I will send the PowerPoint slides, inshallah, on the group. And I would recommend look at each name, close your eyes, and imagine what that means. Next verse, Mal Qari'ah. What is the striking calamity? Okay, Allah is asking you and I, what is Al-Qari'ah? Do you really know what Al-Qari'ah is? Are you ready for Al-Qari'ah? Can you handle that shock, that loud noise? Because remember, we said Qari'ah is like this loud crash, annoying noise. Are you prepared for it? It's like if someone asked, the HSC exam. What is HSC exam? Do you know what's involved in the exam? Have you studied? Are you ready for all the stress associated with that? Allah is asking us this question so that we can ask ourselves, are we really prepared for that day? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ. And what will make you explain what Al-Qari'ah, or the striking calamity, really is? So this verse means, what can make you know what this day is? Like, what can make you understand what this day is all about? It's like Allah read our minds when we read the verse prior to it, which is Mal Qari'ah, what's Al Qari'ah? We're inquisitive, like, we want to know about that day. We're interested in knowing about what happens on that day. And the next few verses are actually going to explain what Al Qari'ah is, the day of judgment. And don't forget who the audience is, because when they heard the word Qari'ah, when they would use it in their day-to-day language, it didn't mean the day of judgment. What did it mean? It meant two things striking each other, colliding, and making a loud noise. So when they would hear this word, this verse, they didn't immediately know that it's referring to the day of judgment. So Allah is saying, Al-Qari'ah. Ma al-Qari'ah? Wa ma adraka ma al-Qari'ah? Do you know what this is? Didn't say, do you know what the day of judgment is? He said, do you know what this striking is? And then the next verse explains it. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. The day when people will be like scattered moths. So now Allah begins now to describe scenes of this day. So the key word here is yawm, which means the day or day. And the next word is farash, meaning moths. And the lastly, one more word that I would like you to memorize is mabthuth, meaning scattered. So try to memorize these words if possible, yawm, farash, mabthuth, because even if you don't know the meaning of every single word, if you memorize the meaning of the key words, you'll kind of get a gist of the main idea associated with this verse. It's really important, okay? So imagine this scene. People are scattered and separated from their loved ones. No one recognizes each other or even cares about anyone, even if they recognize someone. And this panic and this chaos it's like when you see moths running around wildly. Does anyone have moths in their house, especially if you've got like a bright light? They're all bumping into each other. They're going in every crazy direction. They're not going in an orderly fashion. They're going crazy because of sometimes just the shock. Like they're looking at this bright light and they just want to get to it. And notice how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the example of moths, not birds. He didn't say birds. He said moths. Why? Think about it. Because birds, when you see birds flying in the sky, do they look like moths? Like, are they running crazy like this? No, they fly together in harmony and they follow each other in one direction. Whereas moths, they fly directionless. They do not know where to go. So the other thing to know about moths, probably maybe you don't know this, is that moths don't have a home. They are really different to other flying things like bees and or even like ants, like insects like ants, because they have a home, but moths actually don't have homes. So Allah is describing the human being like a moth, because on that day, they will be homeless and they're going to be running in panic and disorder like a moth. So this is, subhanAllah, how Allah is so specific about the words that He uses. وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. And then Allah describes on that day, it's like the mountains are going to be like fluffed wool. Now, I tried to get images, from Google. Obviously, this is not exactly how it looks like. But I tried to get you to imagine, like, these are big, heavy mountains flying up. So the key words here is jibal, which means mountains, and ahnil manfush, which means fluffed wool. Allah, He continues to describe what happens on that day. What's going to happen? The mountains that we know are strong structures. They're heavy. They are proven to be like pegs. They're actually scientifically proven. They hold the earth down from being, shaken up. They prevent it from shaking. However, like on that day, it's so crazy and everything is so upside down that these big, strong mountains, they're going to be as weak as wool. They're going to have no weight, and they're going to be like as light as a feather, like literally, where they're going to be floating around like a feather flies around. And the parable that Allah used here is wool. Now, why did Allah use the example of wool? Try to think about it. I want you to actually think about why Allah uses these particular examples. Because Arabs at that time, they used to deal with wool a fair bit. Okay, they used it a lot in buying and selling. They used to have animals. So they dealt with war and they used to use it to make their clothing. So Allah chose a word that was suitable based on his audience. He didn't use words that they were not familiar with. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. Sorry, another picture there was examples of the fluffed wool and the mountains. As for those whose scales are heavy, I've got a picture of a scale, and subhanAllah, I was really considering I would like to go on some website and try to find one of these real, like these olden day scales. Really want to put it up somewhere in my house to keep reminding myself of the actual scale. We don't know exactly how it looks like, obviously, but I'd like to see a scale where one side is heavy and one side is light, because this is the way that we've been taught how the scales are going to be looked like. So after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us 2 verses explaining how the day of judgment will look like, Allah then begins to describe what follows it, because this weighing of the scale is the next scene. What happens next? What happens after all this chaos and all this running? Finally, we're going to be attended to court. Okay, so court doesn't happen straight away. First, it's rising from the grave. There's the punishment in the grave, there's the rising, there's the chaos, the araf, and then finally you're called into court, and we have our deeds actually being weighed. So in this verse, Allah is describing the one whose good deeds will be weighed heavily on the scale. What will happen to him? The answer is in the next verse. فَهُوَ فِي عَيْشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. Allah explains that this person who, may Allah allow us to all be of them, Allahumma ameen, Ya Rab, the one who has more good deeds, who has heavy on their scale of good deeds, he will be in a pleasant life. So in other words, he's going to go straight to Jannah. There will be enjoyment and a good life, an eternal life of joy, pleasure, ease, contentment. Now of all the things that they want and they need, and it's forever. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. But not everyone will be like that. As for the one whose scales are light, so what exactly happens to the one whose scales of good deeds is light? There are people that are Muslims and they did say the Shahada, but unfortunately, their evil deeds outweighed their good. Yes, they prayed. Yes, maybe they fasted, but maybe their good deeds was 2,000 and their evil deeds was 2 million. So their evil deeds outweighed. What happens to them? Allah answers it in the next verse. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. His home is the abyss. He will have an abyss. What is an abyss? The dictionary definition of an abyss is it's an immeasurable space that it seems to have no end, like it's a hole that has no end. So it's pretty much a deep hole in the ground, and it's not a pleasant place to be, for sure. I can't help but be, amazed at the specific description that Allah gives, so that we can try to imagine all of this. Like, the scales, how light it is on one side or heavy on the other side, then the destination, then the abyss. It's a deep, never-ending hole, and it's so crazy. I just went on the internet and tried to find some pictures of what they call an abyss, a hole that's really deep. But obviously we know in the akhirah it's way more severe. Another thing that I wanted to remind you of is the word for ummuhu. It also has another meaning. It has the meaning of, because some words have many meanings, and this one it means mother. So when you think of ummuhu, you think mother, right? But subhanAllah, imagine if your mother is an abyss or is the hellfire. So imagine what is going to be squeezing you, just like the squeezing and the tight hug of the mother. Imagine that tight hug is actually going to be the hellfire. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. Do you know what it is, really? Allah again is asking us, do you even know what this abyss is? And Allah asks this question so that we need to think about it. We really need to think, are you aware of how serious this hellfire is? Narun hamiyah. Allah explains what this fire is in the next verse. It is a raging fire. It's not a little match that you turn on and you can put your hands through it. You know how at school they taught you how you can turn the Bunsen burner on and then you swipe your hand in, you're like, yeah, I'll put my hand through the fire. It's not like that. That's not how the hellfire of the Day of Judgment is. It's not like that. This verse only has 2 words, now and hamia. So it's good to memorize these only 2 keywords. So now, which means fire, and hamia, which means raging or something that's been heated up for so long that it's raging. Okay? The abyss, this abyss, it's not just a deep hole. It's more than just a deep hole. Yes, it's a hole that is intense in heat so much that it's raging, but the hellfire is not only a place of hot temperatures. A lot of people think that the hellfire, there's only fire. Yes, it's been given that title, but just because someone has, if you give a name to something, doesn't mean it doesn't have other attributes. Okay? This place, the hellfire, is a creature. It is a creature. It has senses. It breathes. It inhales. It exhales. It speaks. It crushes. It gets angry, just like a living thing. Why? Because it is a living thing. Because there are plenty of evidences found in the Quran which states these things that I'm saying. There's actually a narration where the Prophet ﷺ once said that the fire of hell complained to Allah. And it said, Ya Allah, part of me is eating other parts, gets so full out of its heat. And, it's so full and it's so hot. So Allah gave the hellfire 2 opportunities to exhale. We inhale and we exhale, breathe out. So once in the summer and once in the winter. And that's where we see the freezing weather in winter is coming from. It's due to the exhale of the hellfire. And that's why we see the extreme heat waves happening. It's due to the extreme heat of the hellfire. So I hope, inshallah, that this will help you have a little bit of an understanding that the hellfire is not limited to fire only. I'd like you to imagine this in a micro scale, okay? Like micro mean me. I'm not giving a big example, just a little example to help our minds imagine the severity of hellfire, but it never can, because we've never touched something that's been in the hellfire. We don't know how hot hellfire is, really. We haven't experienced it. So, but I'm going to give you on a micro scale. I want you to imagine, does anyone have a fireplace, okay? Or if you have a fire pit where you roast marshmallows outside, and if you don't, then imagine, okay, just say you have a barbecue, like preferably not a gas barbecue, but one where you heat it up with the faham, the coals. So you see how the fire gets really, really hot, and then it becomes so bright orange, where your face, you can't even handle your face being near it, not in it, but just near it. Like, if you get any closer to the faham, the coal, your eyes, they feel like they're gonna burn. Now, that's how we feel when we're just like next to the fire. We're not in the fire, we're just close to it. And that's the fire of this world. The fire of the akhirah, it's 70 times hotter than the fire of this world. Now, how are we going to handle that? How are we going to handle that hellfire? How? Like, wallahi, I stare at the coal, and I stare at it when we make a barbecue, and I look at it, and especially in the fireplace, I look at the pieces of wood that we put in there, and I put a little chair and I sit in front of the fireplace and I just stare at it. And I stare at it and I stare at it. Sometimes I put a marshmallow in there and I watch my marshmallow melting from the heat. And then as that marshmallow is melting, wallahi, I imagine that's me. That's Jinan melting away. And this is exactly what we need to remember when we're living our daily lives. Not only when we go to a lecture, when we read Quran, we need to reflect about the akhirah, not just its joys, but its punishment in our daily lives, in our daily dealings, so that we can remind ourselves of the punishment of the fire. Like as you're cooking your dinner, as you boil the water for the pasta, imagine that you are being dipped in that boiling water. For those who have a pool, imagine that you are drowning in that water. But only that water isn't water, it's actually blood. And we've got to keep reminding ourselves about these things and put fear, instill fear into your own heart, to warn yourself, to scare yourself from falling into sin, as you will remember the punishment of the hellfire a lot better if you're able to do that. If you go on about your daily lives and you do not think of the day of judgment on a regular basis, honestly, the dunya is going to take over you. Like really, really. It's so going to take you where you're just going to be busy with work, cooking, cleaning, housework, having children, keeping everyone happy, that you actually don't think about what am I doing? Like days, months, years are passing. Have I done anything to prepare for this? This is the test. Where am I going? What have I done today to help build my big Jannah, my big investment? So we really need to we actually need to hear about the Day of Judgment more often. So please, I would recommend that you get that book about the Day of Judgment. Jahannam is not limited to fire. It is a torture house. I repeat, this is the word I always use in my brain to describe Jahannam. It's not just fire. And fire is sufficient. That's enough of a punishment. But subhanAllah, it is a torture house. I know that, of course, no one likes to hear about Jahannam. They don't like to hear about bad stuff. People like to hear about Jannah, the maids, the castles, the delicious food, the fine, beautiful clothing. But if you only hear about Jannah, our heart is only going to have hope in Allah's mercy. And we're going to forget all about Allah's adl, his justice and his ghadab, his anger and his ability to call people to account. We need to remember both Jannah and Jahannam equally. You've got to have fear and you've got to have hope, so that your iman is balanced. You don't want it to lean towards one side, because if you focus too much on one side, it's going to make you despair. And if you only talk about Jannah, it's going to make you have so much hope that you're going to fall into sin and say, oh, khalas, Allah is Ghafur Rahim. Allah is forgiving, He's merciful. Like, I pray, like I wear hijab, Allah's going to, I'll enter Jannah. What about Allah's anger? What about Allah's punishment? So verses such as these, they should instill fear in our hearts, and it should motivate us to prepare for the Day of Judgment, so that we can, inshallah, enter Jannah without going to hellfire first. The fool is the person who either has too much fear or too much hope. The over-hopeful people in Allah's mercy is the one, they rely on Allah's forgiveness so much that they forget about Allah is being just and severe in punishment. Then we have the people that do not consider Allah's mercy and forgiveness, and they focus so much on Allah's ability to punish to the point where they fall into sin, and then they give up on themselves and they go, we're going to hell anyway. Ya Allah. May as well. It's like when someone gets a bit of a low mark in their exam, I'm going to fail, there's no point in studying, and they just completely give up. So their desire for perfection leads them to hopelessness and giving up in working for Jannah. But the wise Muslim, this is where I want us to be. We want to be the wise Muslim, the one who hopes for Allah's mercy and for Allah's forgiveness, but they strive to perfect their worship. Although we may never ever achieve perfection, we still soldier on and remind ourselves that it's all about being on the path. It's not necessarily about getting to the final destination. And let me explain this, okay? Because this might seem like, what did she just say? It's like memorizing the Quran. You need to have a goal that, inshallah, ya Rab, I'm going to memorize the whole Quran. But you might not actually ever memorize the whole Quran. Like, death might take you, it might happen. But the point is that you die in that path, that you die working towards that. You just say you are working towards qiyam al-layl, praying a third of the night. Just say you have this goal, you're striving. You start at 5 minutes every night, 10 minutes every night. After a couple of months, it becomes half an hour every night. And your goal is to achieve a high level, but death might overtake you, but that's okay. Allah will consider what you were doing. So just remember to take these steps and to not be hopeless. So in summary, this surah is a type of warning so that we're prepared for the day of judgment. And out of Allah's justice, He warns us of the day of judgment and of hell and the reward of Jannah, so that we're motivated to work hard and we're fearful enough to stay away from the things that will earn Allah's anger. And may Allah allow us to breeze through the day of judgment, inshallah, ya Rab, so that we can enter Jannah that He's promised without having to experience the pain of hellfire prior to its entry. Allahumma ameen. That's what we want. At the end of the day, we are Muslim and we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we pray and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises the Muslims Jannah. But it is not a ticket where you enter into Jannah just like that without working hard for it. We need to work hard for it. And another thing I would just like to remind everyone, please do not become lax when people around you, maybe your friends, maybe your peer workers, maybe your children or your spouse or your parents are not implementing the deen or going the extra mile. Maybe your peers at work or the people around you at school are not striving for Allah. Maybe they're just doing the basics. This should not demotivate you and allow you to stay on your same level or fall back. You should not follow them and follow the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now that was the end of Surah Al-Qari'ah Tafseer. However, there was something that I had prepared in regards to Surah Al-Takathur that was just like a little addition. It only should, inshallah, take 5 or 10 minutes that I wanted to give last week, but we ran out of time. So inshallah, I'll just speak a little bit about it. So as you know, last week, Surah Al-Takathur was talking about the accumulation of wealth, okay, and hoarding and the result of that, and death. However, I would like to speak a little bit about wealth. And even though it can distract us, I would like you to look at the benefits of it as well. So that inshallah, because I'm just a little bit afraid that if I left you with just, this thought of, okay, acquiring wealth is completely bad. It's only bad when it distracts you. So inshallah, I'm going to talk about this. So Surah Al-Takathur, it spoke about wealth and how it can distract us from our ultimate purpose in life. And what is our ultimate purpose? It's to worship Allah. Now, in saying that, does that mean that we should divorce ourselves from acquiring wealth or even acquiring it in large sums? If the wealth that we're acquiring is more than what our needs are? Because if you sit down and you actually calculate how much wealth you need to survive, like if you add up rent, groceries, bills like amenities, car, petrol repayments, just say you get a round figure, okay? Let's just make it $1,500 a week to survive. Say you've calculated it on the dollar, how much you need to survive, 1,300, 1,500, something like that, give or take. Should we never ever work to get more than that? And would it be a sin upon us if we aim for higher than that and say, save up to buy a house or upgrade our car or strive to purchase better food? Because for you to survive, you can be eating rice and water. And if you ate rice, water, and apples and beans, for example, you would survive. So would it be a sin to strive to live a more comfortable life and to have comfort and variety, eating better food and living a more comfortable life than you do now? Is this a sin? So what we need to remember and think about is how this topic, or acquiring wealth, stands in Islam. Is it forbidden to acquire wealth? Are we prohibited from living a comfortable life? Are we prohibited from striving to earn a better quality living? Are we prohibited from saving wealth, for example? We know it's prohibited to hoard. Are we allowed to save? We need to look at the Quran and Sunnah, and we need to see where it stands here. Because Surah Al-Takathur, it looked at the destructive quality of acquiring wealth and what it does to our iman. it's really not good for our man. Acquiring wealth and hoarding is not good. But is this a general rule? So as you would have gathered, Surah Al-Kafir looks at the hoarder and the one whose purpose in life is to save and not spend. And believe you me, there are many people out there who have this lifelong goal, whose goal is to save, 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 save. And then when they die, they want to have an account that has lots of money that they never ever used on themselves or on their family. So as we mentioned, we've got examples, however, contrary to that, Sahaba who were known for their richness, such as Uthman ibn Affan, and he was known for his piety. So if being rich was such a sin, he would have been advised by the Prophet ﷺ to give it all away. And we also have examples of prophets who were rich and lived extremely comfortable lives. Not comfortable like we live comfortable, I mean really comfortable. Like Sulaiman alayhi salam, he had a really large house. Not large houses like what we know here in Sydney, really large. And they've got several servants. He had several servants. So let's define what is a comfort. Okay, let's give you like the dictionary, like kind of explanation of comfort. Comfort includes things that that are neither necessities of life to keep you alive, but they provide comfort and convenience to man. So they're not things that you need to live. Okay, if you did not eat butter chicken or a roast, you will still live. Like, that's the truth. If you ate rice, you will survive. But meat is actually a luxury. So their consumption makes life for man easier and more comfortable. And a man's ordinary food, clothing, and shelter are his necessities of life. But good and delicious food, good and expensive clothing sometimes, and well-furnished buildings and mansion houses, they're called comforts. They're not called necessities. If someone lived in a garage with a roof over their head, that will fulfill your needs. That actually would. If you ate rice, if you ate apples, and you had two outfits of clothing, one to wash and one to wear, you would survive. But do we see anyone doing that these days? So let's explain. So the Holy Quran commands the Muslims to enjoy the good and the beautiful things of this world in this verse. O children of Adam, attend to your adornments at every time of prayer, and eat and drink and be not excessive. Surely Allah does not like the excessive. So Allah allows us to attend to our adornments, beautification, but don't go overboard. So He allows us to have the beauty of this world and the adornments, but don't go overboard. Okay, so there are many other verses in the Quran. It talks about the good things of life, and don't forget your share. وَلَا تَنْسِ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah actually says in the Quran, and don't forget your portion. That's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows that man and woman, our desire is not only for needs, but we have wants. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He understands that we have this nature and this desire for it. Just like human being. When I say man, it also means woman, just so you know. Man has a natural desire for intimacy, okay, for sexual intercourse. This is a natural instinct in man and woman. And it's encouraged to seek lawful way of fulfilling their desire through marriage. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands that man has this desire. Not like, the people of other faiths where they say so that you can become humble, you need to become a priest or a monk, and you have to give up your desire for intimacy and marriage and children, and you have to wear these basic same clothing. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not expect that of us. Allah recognizes that we as humans, we have a desire for intimacy, material wealth, and having our basic needs met won't satisfy us if we only have that. We have wants that we also actually need to be met, subhanAllah. So Allah expects of us that we're not going to be stingy with the wealth that He bestows on us, and we're recommended to spend it and to not hold on to it, and we're meant to be allowing our wealth to circulate. So we're actually supposed to be spending our wealth, and this will also generate income for others while we're meeting our needs and our wants. So spending actually makes the economy go round and strive, and saving our wealth does not make the economy go round. Okay, So we are actually in Islam recommended to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing on us and to not hide our blessing from the world. So this does not mean that we are to show off. No, Allah is not encouraging us to show off. No, absolutely not. But we are recommended that if Allah bestows some sort of blessing on you, that this blessing is evident on you, that you don't hide it and in front of anyone look poor when you are actually not poor. I hope that makes sense. So we have a report from Abu al-Ahwas. He reported from his father that he went to the Prophet ﷺ in dirty clothes, and the Prophet asked him, "Are you wealthy? Like, do you have money?" And replied in the affirmative, like, "Yeah." Then the Prophet ﷺ asked him, like, "What sort of wealth do you have?" And replied that, "Alhamdulillah, Allah gave him camels and goats and horses and slaves." And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "When Allah has bestowed his bounty upon you, he likes the effect of his bounty should appear on you." Meaning that if Allah has given you wealth, why are you dressed in this manner? You shouldn't be in this way. And I'm not here referring to designer brands. Please, this is not referring to extravagant, because I do believe that these designer brand things are all for show. This whole Gucci, I can't even remember their names, to be honest, because I don't get them, but they are extravagant because it's not about quality, it's just about look. They are overpriced so that people look at others and say, "Oh, they're rich." It's not about quality. It's not about getting good quality furniture or a good quality car that has a good engine and that fulfills its need. No, these brand name designer stuff, it's just so that people can look at you and say, "Wow, you are upper class," and this is not encouraged in Islam. Okay, so please do not assume that this is what I'm referring to. According to Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, "God himself is beautiful and he likes beauty." So this means that if Allah gave you wealth, don't hide it. Spend it. Spend it on whom? On yourself first, then spend it on your family, your household. If you can, this is really addressing the men, subhanAllah, but it can be referring to the women. If you can afford a good car, like you have the money to buy a good car, then you should be buying a good car. If you can afford a good house, then buy a good house. If you can afford good clothes, I'm not talking about designer clothes, good quality clothes, then buy good quality clothes and food. The point is that we don't buy them when we don't have the money. This is the problem. Spending above our means is not good. What we're meant to do is we're supposed to be spending according to what our means permit. So if you're able to be hospitable to your guests and put them the best that you can afford, then you should be doing that. You should be making your guests feel special. If you have the physical and the financial ability and the time to put food for your guests and clean it up, according to your culture, your urf, then do so. It's not extravagance to put your guest the best that you can afford. Contrary to that, it's actually a sign of piety and your desire to be the best. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, "The best of you are those who are best to their guest." How can you be best to your guest? So that when they come, they feel comfortable, they feel happy, they feel like that you're spending your time and your wealth on them. This is what the guest wants to feel, that you're spending your time and your wealth and your effort on them. According to Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, this is another narration, we proceeded along with the Prophet ﷺ to the battle of Zatul Ruka. There was a man with us from whom we arranged the provision of his journey, and in return, he grazed our cattle. He wore 2 pieces of cloth which were completely torn. Seeing him in this condition, the Prophet ﷺ asked about him, like, "Hasn't he got more clothes with him?" Jabir replied that he had given him some clothes which he kept in his bag. So this man that was wearing the tall clothes had some spare clothes in his bag. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Jabir to tell him, "Go and wear those good clothes." So he took out those clothes and he put them on. And when he walked away, the Prophet ﷺ said, like, "What happened to him?" Like, meaning, like, what happened to him? Why did he wear those torn clothes when he kept the good ones with him? And subhanAllah, we see that so often where people have really good things. Like, for example, they'll have good clothes, they have good car, but they will drive around in a bomb and something that's fallen apart, when they have something that's good, or they have good clothes, but they will just wear the fallen apart clothes. They have the money to buy good food for their family, but no, only Allah knows why they do this. I actually can't understand it myself. Because if you have something, you have wealth, the most important thing is that you spend it on your family first, rather than hoarding it in a bank. So the point that I wanted to raise is the fact that we are permitted in Islam to live comfortably, and we're not sinning if we drive a good car. I'm not talking about show-off cars here. I'm talking about good quality. If you can afford a spacious home, or if you can afford good quality furniture, that's fine, as long as you're not doing these things and buying these things to specifically draw attention to yourself by showing the people, hey, I'm better than you. Look at my car. What kind of car are you driving? Oh, that one still. When are you going to upgrade? You can't throw these comments on people to make people feel like they are lower than you. So remember, your intention is very important. In fact, it's very praiseworthy for a man to spend his wealth on his family and to be a good provider and seeing to all the financial needs of his family. This man that does this is very praiseworthy, because the man that does this, he's looking after his family without having to make them work. And these days you will see a lot of children are working from a young age, not because they're financially struggling. When a family is financially struggling, I encourage children to work, and I think it's very good. But what I'm saying is that particularly girls, working out and mixing with men, and there's no real need. Like, it's not a necessity. It's only because the breadwinner is saving their wealth to spend it on their hobbies and their wants, rather than seeing to the needs of the family. And we ask Allah to protect us from this. And we ask Allah to allow the men of this ummah to fulfill their obligations towards their families, and to support their families financially and spiritually. And may Allah allow us women to appreciate the hard work that our husbands do for our comfort, inshallah. Ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.